To start off with the low poly, it's good to separate your low poly and your high poly in Blender using collections. So I'm creating a collection for the high poly and one for the low poly. And then to start off, I'm simply going to select a polygon from one of the high poly objects, and I'm deleting the subdivision modifier, and I'm going to add a displace modifier. The reason I'm duplicating a face from an existing object is because then I already have the mirror modifier set up, and it's just a bit quicker that way. The reason I'm using a displace modifier is because that will offset the geometry, the low poly geometry, a little bit from the high poly geometry that I'm snapping to. Make sure that you check the edit mode button on the displace modifier so that when you're moving stuff around in edit mode, you see the effects of the displace modifier. And then the only thing that I do in the displace modifier is I set the strength to a very, very low value, something like 0.03, 0.04. I'm turning on snap, and then I'm setting the snap to face and making sure that align rotation to target and project individual elements is turned on as well. And with snap on and displace modifier, when I'm moving around faces, edges and extruding stuff, it's always going to snap to the underlying geometry, in this case the high poly shotgun. So the process is relatively simple. I'm just extruding the existing faces and moving them around so that they roughly match the high poly. Once in a while you'll see me toggle on and off the displace modifier to see how the mesh looks without the displace modifier, and then the amount of topology that you're adding obviously depends on how high poly you want your low poly to be. Depending on how you want to bake and how you want your final low poly to be set up. One choice is whether you want the individual pieces to also be individual pieces on your low poly. So we have the trigger, the handle, the barrel. In this case, or in my case, I'm actually choosing to have all of it connected. The disadvantage of connecting is that because you're working with the low poly, the transition between the angles going from one part to another part, you might get weird looking normals or normal artifacts. Normal artifacts are polygons that are shaded, or part of them are shaded a little bit darker, and it's just the normal struggling to resolve in a way that makes sense. Luckily, there's ways to negate that, and one of them I'll go over later, but it's essentially just splitting the parts after you've modeled it. And for the low poly modeling process, I'm really just using existing tools. The only exception here is that I'm making use of the F2 add-on. The F2 add-on is an add-on that comes with Blender, but you just have to enable it in your preferences. And what it allows you to do is when you press the F key, when you have a vert selected, it essentially creates a new polygon. So it's a very quick way to retopologize. So I'm using that along with just the basic modeling tools like extrusion.